for 30 bucks less 40 feet from here. Right? Does that change the game? When the consumer can say, this thing has a 1 out of 5 review, you're better than that. You shouldn't sell this type of crap in your store. You shouldn't have these types of brands here, right? So these are transitions, again, where people look at it and say, like, what's our web strategy? And what's our mobile strategy? Terrible strategy. The strategy, I believe, is thinking about one line of connectivity. Right? Your consumers are now fundamentally connected. They're connected with all sorts of devices, and the devices keep changing and getting more advanced and smarter. And so you see things where we evolve beyond pictures and we move towards video, augmented reality, and the like. I mean, I love the Yelp engine. It's called Monocle, and it's based on augmented reality. And what you do is wherever you are, you're in downtown Boston, you hold this up wherever you're standing, and it'll point out to you the restaurants and hotels that you're standing in front of and how many stars they have. And as you move it around, it just adjusts to it. And so if you're standing in front of a crappy 2-star, it'll tell you that a 4-star is just 20 feet from you. And when you click on that, you can actually make a reservation, you can see the menu, you can read reviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're having access to all this really powerful consumer content that consumers want and have an appetite for. And the transition happens at such a rapid phase. And these tools are just readily available, downloaded millions and millions of times. People are getting into this more and more and more and more. And then the devices change. I loved when the iPad came out and people were saying things like, it doesn't have flash. Oh, there's no camera in it. Well, now you have the iPad 2, it has 2 cameras, right? Or you can't make a phone call with it. You know how stupid you would look trying to make a phone call with this thing? I mean, idiotic. Why would you want that, right? But there's some fundamental things happening here that people don't talk about. You know, you hit this, how many of you use laptops at home and at work? Probably all of you now, right? You don't fix computers anymore. And what you do is you take your laptop home after a long day and you open the lid and you hit the power on button and you take your shoes off or go to the bathroom and take a pee and you come back and you type in your password and you hit enter and you go take your clothes off and start boiling the water and you come back and it's crashed. So you're like, oh, reboot again, I guess, right? Suddenly you have this device that you hit this button and boom, it's on like electricity. And there you go, off to the races. We take for granted a lot of things with computers, right? You got to install the software off a CD-ROM, you got to double click, you got to know how to install, you got to Control-C, you got to double click on a mouse, you got to right mouse click, you got to do all this stuff and suddenly all that's gone. Right? You need an app, you need a solution, you click a button, 99 cents, sometimes free, maybe even 10 or 20 bucks, perfect. Right? Thing breaks, no problem. Plug in another one, off you go to the races. Now, it's not that perfect, but it's getting pretty close to perfect, right? And we're connected with it. We're completely untethered. So whether you're sitting at home or you're using a 3G, a 4G, a wireless, the transitions are fairly seamless. And the consumers really feel that, and that also engenders this idea of one line of connectivity. They just feel like they have access and connectivity everywhere they go. But the biggest thing is the humanization of it, right? If you give presentations, tell me what it's like to sit across from your prospect, have the computer there with your laptop, and you're like clicking away on things like notice, and you're doing this and that whole thing, versus sitting next to them and handing them the iPad and going, you drive. Right? You touch, you swipe, you move, you feel. All of those things are very human gestures. And what they do is they create this humanization of the web. And so as social media humanize the interactions that people have, the devices are now catching up and humanizing the experience and taking away the technology. And when that happens, I'm really here to tell you, it's a game changer. Everything changes. The minute we make technology simple, easy, and intuitive to use, it becomes crazy mass. And it goes off in a way that we could never imagine possible. I have a 2.5-year-old son. That's not him. My son's cuter. And one day I was sitting at home, and I was just in the bedroom putting stuff away, and my wife says to me, come and see what your son is doing. How many of you have kids? Raise your hands. You know that when your wife says, come and see what your son is doing, what's that code for? That's code for your son is screwing up, and he's your kid now, right? When she says, come and see what our son is doing, I'm like, yeah, you know. When it's come and see what your son is doing, it's like, oh, here we go. And so I go into the den, and there's my 50-inch plasma, and my son is standing in front of it, and he's going like this. Oh, it gets better. It gets better. He starts going, he's 2.5. He starts going, Dada, TV broken. Angry Birds. Great. So the first look I'm getting is, how does he know what Angry Birds is, right? But think about that for a second. Just think about that. My son will never know what it's like to use a keyboard and a mouse. I mean, a keyboard and a mouse to my son is going to look like a rotary phone looks like to me, right? It's like ridiculous and stupid, and why do we have that, right? These are big, big changes. The day before that, my son is sitting on my lap, and my MacBook Pro's open, and he's like touching the screen because the Thomas video's on, and I'm like swatting his fingers away, like, don't put your fingerprints all over my screen. Big mistake. See, that was stupid of me. And it's also indicative of how we are as marketers, you see? Because what we're doing is we are internalizing our own traditional values and pushing them out into this new world. We're forcing the world to try and react to a world that isn't anymore. And we have a hard time adapting to this new world. So people will say to me like, oh, like, no, it'll never be like that. You always need a keyboard. Like for years, I heard people saying like, I could never type with my thumbs. That worked out really well for everyone, right? Now I hear the whole, I could never type on glass. We'll see. We'll see. These transitions are so big, and so when I hear people even today talking about the social web or your website, in my brain I'm going, we need new vocabulary. Because we're no longer in that world when it comes to social or understanding what people are saying anymore, which is why we're here. You see, we live in the world now of web, mobile, and touch. And there are three very different experiences. And if you're creating content for it, and you're listening to what people are saying about it and how they're talking about it, the way they interact and use things on these platforms are fundamentally different too. And it's incumbent on us in this room to be the first line of defense now. Because you see, if we drop the ball now and we don't get this right, we're screwing it up for every marketer that comes after us. This is the opportunity, like this is our moment. We will never have an opportunity like this again as marketers to literally remap what it is people do with our products, brands, and services and how to push these ideas forward. And I'm not crazy, like I was literally sitting in the lobby and this came up in my inbox and I'm sharing it with you. Like 80% use smartphones to car shop. Do some quick math there about how the world is changing and how rapid this is happening. This is literally happening today, right before our eyes. And people go, but it's just kids. Like Facebook is just university kids, isn't it? Just trying to hook up and stuff. And it's not. Like this is a real stat, right? There are more grandparents than high school students on Facebook. What's going on here? It's pretty simple, right? If you have kids, you know that the best person to creep on what your kids are doing on Facebook is not you. It's the grandparent. You see, grandparents and grandkids are in cahoots to make the parents' lives miserable. And so that's the best thing they could do, right? The grandparents can actually see what they're doing, right? They can make sure that Timmy, who's gone off to university, is not posting too many pictures of himself drunk or in promiscuous positions with boys and girls, doesn't matter anymore, right? And that's just the sort of way it is. And it's true. And by the way, it's not uncommon in the US for a kid to have 6 or 8 grandparents. And you can see how this plays out then, right? You have a multiplier effect happening. So grandma joins Facebook to see what Timmy's doing. And then the next thing you know, and you know what happens because this happens to you, is you get that weird invite from a friend. But it's not a friend, it's actually a third cousin from Europe that you haven't seen in like 20 decades. And so grandma adds this person, and suddenly she's like Neo in the Matrix, and she's down the rabbit hole, and she's like adding friends, and she's like tagging pictures, and she's joining events, and the whole transition happens suddenly, right? And she's doing things, she's joining a digital knitting circle, so they're sharing knitting tricks, and then they're adding like friends from high school who graduated the same year, and it's on and on and on and on. People make the wrong assumptions about this space. It happened at that dinner where Avinash pointed out to the person it's probably not the best idea for the 23-year-old to lead it because that's not the only people here. What we're seeing is that, yes, connectivity is still a bit of an issue in North America. It's getting better and better, but people are fundamentally connected. And this matters because these are mostly the people who buy from us and interact with us. And so there's a whole other conversation, but we're here to really talk about business. And the people who primarily buy from us are hyper-connected. And they're men and they're women and they're educated and they've got money and they're et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's everyone and anyone. We're not in that day and age where it's just young people. Yes, when it's something new like color or whatever, it tends to skew more male and more, but as it becomes more pervasive, like Twitter has and Facebook, it homogenizes in a very dramatic fashion, right? How many of you agree or disagree with this statement? You don't buy anything unless you go online to see what others who have bought before you have done, correct? And so you have this information anywhere and everywhere. And yet, let me poll the audience here. Raise your hand if you have a website that actually allows people to say whatever they want about your products and services. Hands up if you have that type of website. Okay, good. Yeah, it's usually about that. So what's wrong with everyone else? Just think about what we just did as an exercise. We all agreed that nobody buys anything without looking what someone else has done before them, and yet we're all like, well, we don't have that stuff. What's wrong with you? Now, let me answer it for you, because it's the same answer everywhere. You're scared. You're scared about what people might say about your product. You're scared somebody will say something negative about it. You're basically scared. And you're freaking out, and the bosses are worried about it too, and the implications. What if people say something? How do we respond? We're a highly regimented business, et cetera, et cetera. Let me disabuse you of this. I introduced you earlier to Sam Decker from Bazaar Voice. So Bazaar Voice does these third-party audit for customer reviews. Basically, they're an engine you put into your system. Why? When a consumer comes, it's validation that the person who wrote the review is a real person, and they're not an employee or whatever of the company. right? They also do auditing for things like bad language or religious content, et cetera, whatever filters you want to have for it. Now, to date, Bazaar Voice has served over 150 billion impressions of customer reviews. They have a fairly good market research thing to look at there. Now, in that, what do you think the numbers tell us? Well, what's the average review out of a 5-star and 150 billion impressions? The answer is 4.3 out of 5. We actually know statistically that if you open up and allow people to say what they want about your products and service, they say great things about you. Star caveat. The star caveat is you can't suck. You see, if your products or services suck, social media can't save you. Marketing can't save you. Advertising can't save you. Only you and your desire to not have a sucky product can save you. That's all we got left, right? Now, the other thing is the negative reviews. So this is also really interesting, probably the coolest thing I read in this data. It said that a negative review actually converts more effectively to a sale than a positive review. Now, I know it's been a long day, so I'll repeat myself. A negative review converts more effectively to a sale than a positive review. How is that possible? The smaller instance of this is something you might sort of figure out in your brain, which is trust. So the consumer comes to your site and reads a bad review and goes, listen, if these guys are willing to post that, they must be honest and real, I'm going to buy from them. But that's actually not the biggest chunk. The biggest chunk has to do with sentiment. And so it was really exciting to see Radian6 talk about insights today, because sentiment is such a powerful thing. So what's happening here is actually this. Prior to my son being born, we wanted to buy a simple point-and-shoot camera. So I go online to see the review and what they say, and of course, my luck, I get the 1 out of 5, right? And so I read the review, but what the person wrote is something like, I've been a professional photographer for over 20 years. This camera offers very limited manual functionality. It claims to have a 14-time zoom, but only clocks in at 11.387. It's probably only good if all you want to do is take pictures of your family and friends. I'm like, jackpot. Exactly. I'm an idiot. I'm terrible with cameras. If you give me more buttons, I will screw it up. I'm not looking for a crazy zoom. It's a baby. They're not going to move all that much. I can get in pretty tight. I'm not really, right? It makes perfect sense. And you've had this happen to you so many times, right? You go on TripAdvisor and look at a hotel, and the person gives it like a 2 out of 5, and they go, very clean, quiet hotel, very nice staff, but there wasn't a chocolate on my pillow, and I like 80 channels on my TV. They're only 65. I give it a 2 out of 5, and off we go, right? And you're like, what? You're like, are you crazy, right? And this is very standard. And what we're actually seeing is that there's been a big shift in understanding these sentiments. And it's such a powerful thing for us to understand as marketers, right? And you're going to hear a lot of that happen today and over the course of the next about how powerful understanding this real language really is. Now, the reason I get so psyched about this space and I get so excited to be a marketer, it's funny to say I'm proud to be a marketer. Can you imagine 10 years ago saying I'm proud to be a marketer? That's like saying I'm proud to be a used car salesman. I'm proud to be a lawyer. I like being known publicly as a scumbag, right? It's like the same, they all sort of fall, right? They all fall in line. But it's really true. And the reason why I think there's a pride in being a marketer now is because of this. The web has really brought us back in the social web and these tools and these connectivity platforms to a place where everybody can have real interactions with real human beings. You see, it's not just about monitoring and responding. There's something else that happens that so few people talk about, which is, you're monitoring your response. So I say something crappy and you respond, and it's great, and we fix it. Thank you. We're done. Like Radian6, save the day, right? But other stuff happens that's so powerful and valuable, which is the next day you do a search for the same product, and you have a similar question, and you see this interaction that happened over here and it actually answers and resolves an issue you were thinking about. So you actually had a real interaction with real human beings without ever anything happening. See, suddenly these conversations, communications, engagements, whatever we want to call them, are highly distributable. And they're available, and they're in this amazing encyclopedia of the world called Google or Bing or Yahoo. And the conversation extends and moves into different areas where really as a brand, what you're here to talk about is this. What you're saying is we need to listen to what our customers are doing, and we need more of these real interactions with real human beings. But it forces you and your business to have a paradigm shift. You see, it's not as simple as just buying it and implementing the solution and building a team around it. It requires you to have a paradigm shift in how you see the market. You see, traditionally, marketers see the market in just the left-hand side of this equation. How many? If I blast my message in front of enough people, a small percentage of them will become my customers, and then we all win, and that's how life works. See, this new web, this social web, these mobile channels, these touch platforms don't really engender the masses. Yes, you can broadcast to millions and millions of people, but what's valuable is the other side of this. How many? See, it's not